So what we have here is a variant on the Chapter 4 quarterly data workbook. Here I've underscored it randomized because I've replaced some numbers with random ones. For example, the EPS figures here, they're no longer fixed. They're now changing to reflect the idea that often we have data sets that do get updated, maybe on a monthly basis for some data on an hourly basis. On some items, we may be updating it yearly. Here we have EPS. It's getting updated. It's getting updated by using a random number within a reasonable range. In reality, obviously, you'd be drawing data from another database that's getting updated or from some online resource. Here I'm keeping it simple. I'm just using a random number to kind of simulate some EPS figures. Now it's clear if you look at the column here, J, that if we refresh the data, let's either hit F9 or go to data refresh, these numbers do change. However, as I change these figures, if they're being summarized in something like a pivot table, as they are on this workbook and in the previous workbook, that same data refresh will also refresh any information in this pivot table and will in fact refresh these graphics. Now F9 won't. That nice little shortcut key that we've found fairly easy to access, F9, that will recalculate things, will recalculate all those randomized numbers, but it's not going to update the pivot table, which means yes, we'd have to actually go up to data refresh all to do that activity. Now, on top of that, I've mentioned before that sometimes we don't want graphs of the summarized data from a pivot table to exist in the same sheet. Why is that? Well, when we change the structure of the pivot table, that sometimes overwrites or at least gets in the way of some of the aesthetics of those graphics. It's safer to keep the graphics of what are being summarized in pivot tables separate from the pivot tables themselves, actually on a different worksheet. So I've taken two of the EPS charts here and I've stored them on a separate worksheet called EPS graphs. These are the same graphs, only a little bit larger than on this previous sheet. And so they're getting updated by the same data. And they require us going to at least data refresh to get the updates on a regular basis. It's not that bad, but if we do want to refresh using a shortcut key route, which is perhaps a little bit more convenient for some, we have that capability as well. It's going to require us writing a macro, and here's how we do it. We'll go back to the developer in this case. We simply do record macro, and very easily we're going to call this maybe macro 3 or whatever. I'll use the shortcut Control T key as before. Here it's not being used for anything else at this point, and I don't use it in its default setting, so I'm going to be using this as my designation. Press OK, and all I'm recording now is refresh all. Stop. Now all I have to do is press the Control T button, and now I have a keyboard shortcut to updating these graphs. Again, that's just another nice convenience I can get out of the macro recording process.